Now, our second foundation is the quality and quantity of your client's protein intake. Now, a common method used during most fat loss strategies really is to follow a high protein diet, which is an excellent idea, especially if your goal is to ensure long-term success with your client's protein intake. Ensuring that this is actually going to play a key role in that. However, too much of a good thing can end up being a bad thing. And this is partly why I don't like to get my weight loss clients to have a protein target for the day. Because let's say, for example, you could set your client 120 grams of protein for the day. And come 7 o'clock, they might say, oh shit, I've only had 40 grams of protein today. So I need to make up the extra 80 that I'm missing. So what they do is they go and nail 2 large chicken breasts for dinner. Now, what's important to note is that the muscle only really maximally metabolizes between 20 and 40 grams of protein at one time. So let's say that your client goes and consumes 80 grams of protein. Well, maybe 40 grams of that will be utilized by the muscle. Bearing in mind, 40 probably is the upper limit, and really when you're doing full body exercise or if you have a really large individual as a client. But the problem is that your client's consuming 80, so maybe 40 of that gets taken up by the muscle. But the problem is that we're then left over with an additional 40 grams. Well, the thing is that the body doesn't really like to use amino acids directly as a fuel. So what happens is that the body can actually convert these excess amino acids into something else. In that, it can actually convert them into glucose. Now, what happens is that excess glucose triggers an insulin response, which can then impair fat oxidation. So indirectly, consuming too much protein can actually have a negative impact on fat oxidation. Now, like I said, this is when you're eating protein to excess. But on a positive note, protein is required to ensure the maintenance and the growth of lean muscle tissue. And how I like to look at building lean muscle tissue is the same way as building a house. Because all your training is you giving the body an instruction, then it needs to change, it needs to adapt to cope with the demands of a greater load. So effectively, what your training does is send the builders to the house, instructing them on what type of house that they need to build and how you want to build it. And your client's protein intake is the bricks that the body's builders like to use. So you could send the best builders in the world to the building site, i.e. nail the training session that your client could nail their training session to the best of their possible ability. But if you don't provide these builders with any bricks, I promise you, I know builders pretty well, they can't do anything, they'll bugger off. So in that, you can get your client nailing the perfect high quality training session, but if they don't provide the body with the protein that it requires, then their ability to build lean muscle tissue is going to be hindered. So really ensuring that the ideal quantity and quality of protein is provided to your clients will ensure that we satisfy our second pillar with the maintenance and growth. Oh, don't need to go on to that one. The maintenance and growth of lean muscle tissue. But again, as I'll go into in greater detail about it in the hub, especially when we cover our masterclass, it's really not about just eating any old bits of protein. 20 grams of protein from a chicken breast is very different to 20 grams of protein from lentils. They may have the same protein content, but they have a completely different composition of amino acids. And these amino acids, specifically tryptophan, are the main drivers of protein's ability to satisfy and suppress appetite. So, as I'm sure that you're aware that protein is the most satiating nutrient. So consuming a high amount of protein on a regular basis is going to allow your client's appetite to be satisfied and suppressed. And again, I'll go into greater detail about it during our masterclasses, but the quality of protein intake really is important when it comes to appetite. So finally, just summarizing all of these. So excess protein intake. Now, I'm talking about really high quantities of protein can have a negative impact on fat oxidation due to this process of gluconeogenesis, where the body converts it into glucose, which can stimulate insulin, and as a result, that can impair fat oxidation. Secondly, protein is necessary for the maintenance and growth of lean muscle tissue. And finally, protein is the most satiating nutrient. Getting the right sort of amino acid profile in there, so ideally high tryptophan containing foods, can really have a greater impact on suppressing appetite. And that is how our second foundation, protein, interacts with all three of our pillars.